How to Train Your Dragon. Finding a Black Dragon Egg from Monster Hunter. Chapter 61. It was a dragon even larger than Lin remembered. The Red Death's total length was at least 150 meters, a full circle larger than in the original work. Its entire body was covered in dark red scales that shimmered with a metallic luster, as if tempered by magma, making them incredibly hard. Its wings spread out, with a wingspan of 200 meters. The scales on the edges of its wings were as sharp as blades, and the air currents generated by their flapping made the entire interior of the volcano chaotic. Its head was enormous, larger than Toothless's body. Its eyes were green, and it had 3 pairs of them, leaving almost no blind spots, exuding a suffocating pressure. Magma constantly dripped from its body, landing on the rocks below with a sizzling sound. Its neck was thick, and its back was covered in protruding spines, making it look exceptionally ferocious. As this, the evolved Red Death. Fishleg's voice trembled with shock, his dragon observation manual nearly slipping from his hands. Its size is much larger than recorded, and its scales are darker. It must have absorbed ley line energy. As soon as the Red Death appeared, it noticed Astrid and Stormfly falling. It let out a deafening roar, louder than all the dragon's roars combined, causing the rocks inside the volcano to tremble slightly. It opened its massive mouth, and a scorching flame was about to blast towards Astrid and Stormfly. Quick, attack the Red Death. Stop it! Lin shouted, controlling Mira to fly towards the Red Death's head, red flames condensing to the extreme in Mira's mouth. Mira, unleash dragon breath. Mira let out a loud dragon roar, and red dragon breath spewed from her mouth, flying towards the Red Death's left eye. Hiccup also commanded Toothless, sending a blue plasma fireball towards the Red Death's mouth, attempting to stop it from spewing flames. Although Astrid was still falling, she hadn't lost her composure. She gripped Stormfly's reins tightly and shouted, "Stormfly, use your tail barb to attack its eye." Stormfly endured the intense pain, aiming the barb at the tip of her tail at the Red Death's right eye, and with a whoosh, the barb shot out. Fishlegs commanded Meatball, and a scorching lava waterfall flew towards the Red Death's head, attempting to obstruct its vision. Toughnut and Roughnut commanded the deadly Natter. Belch spewed a large amount of gas, enveloping the Red Death's head, and Baff immediately spewed flames. With a bang, the gas exploded, and flames and smoke enveloped the Red Death's head. Toughnut commanded Hookfang to use Flame Rush Slash, flying towards the Red Death's wings, attempting to cut them. 6 attacks simultaneously hit the Red Death. Mira's red dragon breath struck the Red Death's left eye. Although it didn't pierce the scales, it temporarily blinded its eye, causing it to let out a painful roar. The blue plasma fireball hit the Red Death's mouth. Although it was blocked by its teeth, breaking a few of them, it paused its flame-spewing action for a moment. Stormfly's tail barb flew towards the Red Death's right eye. The Red Death quickly closed its eye, and the barb exploded. Although it didn't cause fatal damage, blood flowed from the Red Death's right eyelid. The lava waterfall landed on the Red Death's head. Although it didn't burn its scales, it slowed its movements. The flames and smoke from the gas explosion enveloped the Red Death's head, obstructing its vision and temporarily preventing it from locking onto targets. Hookfang's Flame Rush Slash hit the Red Death's left wing. Although it only inflicted 3 small cuts, it reduced the amplitude of its wing flapping. Roar! The Red Death let out an angry roar, its voice filled with pain and fury. Its body shook violently, trying to shake off the attacks, but the team's continuous assaults kept it from attending to the falling Astrid and Stormfly for the moment. But just then, the wound on Stormfly's right wing suddenly tore open. She let out a pained shriek, and her body lurched. The reins Astrid was clutching snapped with a thump. She lost her support and plummeted from Stormfly's back like a falling leaf. Astrid. Hiccup's roar instantly pierced through the smoke. Stormfly wanted to dive after her but was too weak in the wings, only able to watch helplessly as her rider fell faster and faster, with a platform covered in rubble below. Astrid felt the hot wind whistling past her ears, and the rubble was clearly visible. She instinctively curled up, but suddenly felt a tightening around her waist. Toothless had charged in from the side, firmly supporting her waist with his front paws. Hiccup's upper body was half stretched over Toothless's back, his hands gripping her arms tightly, his nails almost digging into her sleeve. "Hold on to me. Don't let go." Toothless growled, adjusting his posture, his wings grazing the platform's rubble before steadily pulling Astrid onto his back. Stormfly. Catch up. Astrid shouted back as soon as she was stable. Stormfly immediately flapped her left wing to catch up, staying close beside Toothless. Just as everyone breathed a sigh of relief and prepared to fly towards the top of the volcano, they suddenly felt a wave of heat pressing down from above. The Red Death had broken through the gas smoke, its massive body suspended at the top of the volcano, its spread black wings blocking all escape routes like dark clouds. Its crimson eyes were locked onto the team below, the red glow in its mouth growing brighter, and scorching breath drifted down with the wind, clearly intending to spew deadly flames. Oh no! The path is blocked. Toughnut's voice trembled, and Hookfang nervously backed away. Even the ferocious monstrous nightmare shrank its neck under the Red Death's pressure. Toughnut was about to tell Baff to spew gas in retaliation when Roughnut grabbed his arm. Are you crazy? At this close range, a gas explosion will turn us into ash first. Just as everyone was in despair, Lin suddenly stared at the bottom of the volcano and shouted, "Everyone, follow me." Lin controlled Mira to fly towards a hidden cave at the bottom of the volcano. The cave entrance wasn't large, but it was big enough for the team's dragons to enter. Fishlegs, Toughnut and Roughnut, and Toughnut also followed Lin, flying towards the cave. Toothless was the first to rush into the cave, with Hiccup and Astrid on his back, entering successfully. Mira followed closely, Lin carefully controlling her to avoid the rocks at the entrance and enter the cave. Meatball, the deadly Natter, and Hookfang also entered the cave. Only Stormfly stumbled at the cave entrance. Stormfly, hurry up. The Red Death is catching up. Astrid cried out anxiously. Stormfly let out a low growl, struggled to her feet, and then ran quickly. The moment Stormfly's body fully entered the cave, the Red Death's flames reached the entrance. With a deafening roar, the Red Death's flames impacted the cave entrance, instantly shattering the rocks. The flames were about to engulf them. Quick! Destroy the cave entrance. Seal it off. Lin shouted. Mira immediately turned around, a fiery red fireball condensing in her mouth. Everyone, attack the cave entrance with your dragon breath. Okay. Everyone responded in unison, controlling their dragons to turn and aim at the cave entrance. Mira spewed a fiery red fireball, Toothless spewed a blue plasma fireball, Stormfly shot explosive tail barbs, Meatball spewed lava bombs, the deadly Natter's Baff exhaled gas smoke, Belch spewed scorching flames, and Hookfang unleashed his strongest dragon breath. 6 attacks, like a torrent of magma, crashed into the cave entrance. Boom, boom, boom. A deafening roar erupted within the narrow cave. Red fireballs, blue plasma, lava, and flames intertwined into a scorching energy mass, instantly pulverizing the rocks at the entrance. The shockwave from the explosion kicked up a shower of debris. Rubble mixed with sparks rained down, quickly piling up into a several-meter-thick stone wall, tightly sealing the cave entrance, leaving only the dark red glow of the Red Death visible through the cracks. Roar. The Red Death's furious roar came from outside the cave, shaking the rubble on the cave ceiling, and even the ground beneath their feet trembled slightly. Following that was a deafening boom, clearly the Red Death slamming its massive head against the cave entrance. The surface of the stone wall instantly became covered in cracks, as if it could collapse again at any moment. Fall back. Get away from the passage entrance. Lin shouted, controlling Mira to fly deeper into the flat area. The flapping of her black wings stirred up a hot wind, scattering the surrounding sparks. Everyone retreated, soon arriving at the center of a larger space within the cave. Let's rest for a bit. Lin said, softening his tone as he saw their tense expressions. We've run over 100 meters, and both everyone and the dragons are quite exhausted. Let's check for injuries and catch our breath before thinking about what to do next. Astrid immediately knelt down to check Stormfly's injuries. She gently stroked the wound on Stormfly's right wing. Several blue scales had fallen off there, revealing the tender pink flesh beneath, which was oozing faint drops of blood. She had scraped it on the rubble while running, and the edges of the wound were somewhat swollen. Does it hurt? Astrid's voice was unusually gentle. She pulled out an herbal ointment from her pocket and carefully applied it to the wound. Bear with it. This ointment will relieve the pain. When we get out, I'll find you the best herbs. Stormfly let out a low whimper, rubbing her head against Astrid's hand, as if saying, I'm fine. The barb at the tip of her tail swayed gently, but it lacked its previous sharpness. Hiccup also knelt down to check Toothless's condition. Toothless's claws had just gotten a little magma on them, and the scales on his belly had been scorched by the Red Death's flames, yet he still excitedly nuzzled Hiccup's palm with his nose, making a purring sound in his throat. "You always push yourself so hard," Hiccup said with a smile, rubbing his head. He pulled out a piece of dried fish from his pocket and offered it to Toothless's mouth. "This is your reward. When we get back, I'll put your new tail fin on." Toothless swallowed the fish in one bite, his eyes shining like two stars. Fishlegs, meanwhile, ran to the passage entrance and carefully picked up a fallen Red Death's scale. The scale was dark red all over, larger than his palm, with a clear metallic sheen on its surface, seemingly from metal adhering to it from the magma. He immediately pulled out his dragon observation manual, knelt beside Meatball, and quickly recorded his findings. As his fingertips traced the scale, he could still feel a faint burning sensation. "Look at this," Fishlegs said, his voice filled with barely concealed excitement, holding up the scale for everyone to see. "The density of the scales is at least twice as high as recorded, and it contains very rich ley line energy. This means the Red Death has not only grown in size but its defensive capabilities have also increased by more than one level." Lin walked over and took the scale. The energy fluctuations from his fingertips made him frown. "So, our previous attacks didn't cause any fatal damage to it?" "At least not now," Fishlegs nodded, drawing the scale's pattern in his manual. "Its scales can withstand most dragon breath, unless we can find its weak points, like its eyes or throat, where there's no scale protection. And the fact that it could rise directly from the magma pool earlier means its tolerance to high temperatures has also greatly increased. Meatball's lava waterfall might not be very effective either. Then we can't beat it, can we?" Snotlout's voice held a hint of panic. He hugged Hookfang's neck tightly. Hookfang also sensed his rider's tension, letting out a low growl, his crimson scales glowing faintly. "Don't panic," Lin said, handing the scale back to Fishlegs, his gaze sweeping over everyone. "Our mission this time is reconnaissance, not combat. The most important thing now is to find out if this cave has another exit and get out of here." The cave was much deeper and longer than anyone had imagined. The rock walls carried a faint warmth, and touching them with a fingertip allowed one to feel the heat surging beneath the stone. The rock walls were covered in deep brown volcanic rock textures, with some areas retaining smooth traces where lava had once flowed. Occasionally, tiny fissures could be seen, emanating a faint dark red glow, signs of magma activity deep inside. The smell of sulfur in the air hadn't completely dissipated. Instead, it mixed with the scorched smell of volcanic rock, creating a unique, burning scent. Lin rode Mira at the very front, their golden dragon eyes reflecting a faint sheen in the darkness. His brow was tightly furrowed as he considered their retreat. The Red Death had blocked the entrance, so charging out was impossible. They had to find another exit. But this cave was winding and twisting, and the end was nowhere in sight. If they walked into a dead end, the consequences would be unimaginable. Just then, he suddenly remembered Toothless's special ability from the original work, sound wave detection. This ability allowed Toothless to perceive the surrounding environment and structure by emitting sound waves, enabling him to accurately avoid obstacles and find the correct route even in total darkness. This situation was the perfect time to use it. Hiccup. Lin stopped and turned to Hiccup behind him, his tone urgent yet steady. Toothless should have the ability of sound wave detection. Its sound waves can sense the structure of the cave. Maybe it can find another exit. Hiccup paused, then a look of confusion appeared in his eyes. Toothless has an ability like that. He immediately patted Toothless's neck, leaned down, and whispered in its ear, "Toothless, we're trapped now. We need you to use your sound waves to check the path ahead and find a way out. Please." Toothless tilted its head, its golden eyes full of confusion, seemingly trying to understand Hiccup's words. It lowered its head in thought, then looked up at the pitch-black depths of the cave, emitting a low gurgling sound from its throat, as if responding to Hiccup's request. Immediately after, it slightly opened its mouth, the scales on its neck trembling gently. After a moment of preparation, it let out a loud but not piercing low roar. "Awoo." As the roar sounded, a light blue sound wave spread out from Toothless's mouth, like ripples in water, quickly sweeping toward the depths of the cave. The sound wave was visible to the naked eye, glowing with a soft blue light. It swept past the rock walls, bones, and standing water on the ground. Wherever it reached, the outline of the cave clearly appeared under the sound wave's illumination. Everyone held their breath, staring intently at the blue sound wave. Even the dragons quieted down, seeming to sense the feedback of the sound wave. The blue sound wave extended forward, passing through narrow passages and around several hidden corners, slowly dissipating only after about 10 seconds. Toothless closed its eyes, and when it opened them again, they held a trace of certainty. It let out a low growl toward Lin and Hiccup, then turned its head to indicate a direction deep within the cave. The gurgling sound in its throat became lighter, as if saying, "There's a path that way." Hiccup immediately understood Toothless's intention and quickly told Lin, "Lin, Toothless says there's a main passage ahead with no forks, and it sensed a faint airflow, which should be the direction of the exit." Lin sighed in relief, a relieved smile appearing on his face. "That's great. Then let's follow Toothless. Everyone, stay alert. There might still be unknown dangers in the cave, so be ready to react at any time." Understood. Everyone responded in unison, their strained nerves relaxing slightly. Astrid supported Stormfly, letting her follow behind Toothless. Although Stormfly's right wing was injured, fortunately, she could still walk, and the wound wasn't bleeding. Fishlegs carefully put the Red Death's scale into his backpack, then rode Meatball to catch up, still holding his handbook and occasionally recording the cave environment. Toughnut and Roughnut rode the Deadly Natter. Baff and Belch vigilantly scanned their surroundings, ready to attack instantly if there was any movement. Toughnut followed closely behind Stormfly, keeping Hookfang in the middle of the group, not daring to be careless in the slightest. Toothless walked at the very front, occasionally letting out a short, low growl, releasing faint sound waves to confirm the conditions of the path ahead. The blue sound waves swept forward repeatedly, guiding everyone's direction. The darkness of the cave seemed to be torn open by this blue light, bringing hope. Dawn came exceptionally early to Burke Island. The first ray of sunlight had just crossed the horizon, illuminating the scene at the harbor. "Hurry up. Watch out for that catapult." Stoic stood on the highest point of the harbor, watching and giving commands below, occasionally glancing toward the coastline, hoping to see those few figures. Inside the harbor, dozens of warships were neatly lined up. Their hulls were dark, and the carved dragon head patterns on their bows looked especially ferocious in the morning light. Each warship was equipped with sturdy shields and sharp ramming horns. The decks were already filled with fully armed Vikings, who wore heavy leather armor, carried axes, spears, and shields, and whose faces held determined expressions, their eyes burning with the flame of vengeance. The harbor derricks were already busy. Several thick ropes were wrapped around a huge catapult. Over a dozen Vikings pulled the ropes together, and accompanied by the chanting of, "Heave ho, the catapult was slowly lifted off the ground and moved toward the deck of a warship. The catapult stones were polished from hard volcanic rock, about the size of millstones. Their surfaces were still somewhat rough, clearly possessing immense destructive power. "Be careful. Don't scratch the hull." A tall, heavily bearded Viking in charge of the derrick shouted. He was Gobber, the head shipwright of the tribe. He stood on the elevated platform of the harbor, holding a long wooden staff, constantly adjusting the direction of the derrick to ensure the catapult landed smoothly on the deck. Several Vikings jumped onto the deck and quickly secured the catapult with ropes, their movements skilled and swift. One young Viking wiped the sweat from his forehead and said to his companion, "I never thought the day would come when we'd take this many warships to attack the dragon's nest. This time, we must make those dragons pay." "Exactly." His companion tightened his grip on his axe, his eyes resolute. "We must avenge the tribesmen who were killed by the dragons." Not far away, Chief Stoic arrived at the bow of the largest warship. He wore a black cloak, a helmet made from Hiccup's mother's breastplate, and a heavy battle axe hung from his waist, its blade glinting coldly. He gazed profoundly at the distant horizon, which was the direction of the dragon's nest. His brows were tightly furrowed, clearly still worried about the safety of the reconnaissance team. "Chief, all the catapults have been installed, and the warships have been restocked with supplies. We are ready to depart at any time." Gobber quickly walked up to Stoic and said respectfully. Stoic nodded, his voice steady, "We will wait 1 more hour. If Lin and the others haven't returned by then, we will set off first." He knew in his heart that the reconnaissance team might be in danger, but the tribe's revenge plan could not be delayed. The dragons from the Dragon's Nest could strike Burke Island again at any moment. They had to launch a preemptive attack. The surrounding Vikings heard this and began discussing amongst themselves. Lin and the others aren't in trouble, are they? It's already been a day, why haven't they returned? Maybe they've figured out the Red Death's situation and are just being delayed by something. Stoic raised his hand, signaling for silence, and said firmly, they will certainly overcome the danger. What we must do now is prepare thoroughly, wait for their return, or, if necessary, attack the Dragon's Nest directly. He paused, his gaze sweeping over all the Vikings, and raised his voice slightly. For our homeland, and for our fallen tribesmen, we must win this battle. We cannot lose. Victory! 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 The Vikings raised their weapons and shouted loudly, the deafening sound echoing above the harbor, startling even the seagulls on the sea surface, which scattered and flew away. The sails of the warships had been raised, flapping loudly in the morning breeze, as if responding to the Vikings' shouts. The sunlight grew brighter, illuminating every corner of the harbor, and lighting up the determination on the faces of the Vikings. They waiting for the return of the reconnaissance team, and also waiting for the final showdown against the Dragon King. Meanwhile, deep within the cave, Lin's team was still following Toothless's guidance, moving toward the faint airflow. They did not know that Burke Island outside had already prepared for battle, nor did they know if the Red Death was still waiting at the cave entrance. The only thing they could do was trust Toothless, find the exit, and return to Burke Island as quickly as possible with the intelligence they had gathered. Depart. Stoic's roar was like thunder, echoing throughout Burke Island's harbor, making the morning mist in the air tremble. The tall Viking chieftain stood at the prow of the flagship, his black leather armor covered in battle scars. The giant axe in his hand rested diagonally on his shoulder, its blade reflecting his rock-solid, determined face. At his command, dozens of warships in the harbor responded simultaneously. Oars plunged into the sea in unison, splashing white foam like countless giant hands pushing the warships towards the deep sea. Sail ropes were quickly pulled, and huge canvas sails unfurled in the wind, flapping loudly like spreading black wings, carrying a determination for revenge as they sped towards the volcanic island in the northeast. The Vikings stood on the deck, weapons in hand, shouting loudly, their voices deafening. Some waved axes, others pounded shields, their faces filled with fervor and resolve. Flatten the Dragon's Nest. Avenge our kin. The slogans rose and fell, intertwining with the roar of the waves, forming a tragic and valiant battle song. Stoic gripped the ship's rail, his gaze fixed on the distant horizon, but his brow was slightly furrowed. His hand unconsciously tightened around the axe handle, his knuckles turning white. It had been a day and a night, and the scouting party still hadn't returned. Hiccup was his only son, his only remaining family in the world, and there was also an excellent person like Lin. He would definitely lead the tribe to strength in the future. Stoic felt both proud and deeply worried. The Red Death's evolved abilities were unknown, and the volcanic cave was fraught with danger. Would something happen to them? Chieftain, the wind is fair, were expected to reach the outer perimeter of the volcanic island in about 3 hours. The bosun hurried over, reporting respectfully. Stoic slowly nodded, collecting his thoughts, his tone regaining its usual authority. Pass the word, have everyone prepare for battle. After approaching the volcanic island, the fleet will slow down, maintain formation, and be vigilant against dragon attacks. Yes. The bosun responded and left. The warships sped across the sea, waves slapping against their hulls with a thump-thump sound. The Vikings were not fatigued by the long voyage, instead, they grew more excited. Some polished their weapons, keeping axes and spears sharp. Others checked the ropes and stones of the catapults, ensuring they would function when needed. Still others sat together, devouring hardtack and drinking strong liquor, cheering each other on. Stoic listened to the crew's discussions but said nothing. He knew that while these Vikings were brave, they underestimated the Red Death's power. The news from Lin's team, that ley line energy had evolved the Red Death, making it larger, stronger in defense, and even possessing unknown abilities, weighed heavily on his heart like a stone. But it had come to this, the arrow was on the string and had to be loosed. He could only pray in his heart that Lin's team would return safely, and even more, that Hiccup would be alright. After about 3 hours of sailing, a dense mist gradually appeared on the sea horizon ahead. The mist was like a giant gray curtain, stretching between the sea and the sky, boundless, exuding a mysterious and dangerous aura. The sea breeze carried a faint smell of sulfur, making the Vikings on deck instinctively tighten their grip on their weapons. Chieftain, ahead is the mist zone at the perimeter of the volcanic island. The lookout shouted from the top of the mast, "The mist is too thick, we can't see what's inside." Stoic raised his hand, signaling the fleet to slow down. "Everyone be on guard. The fleet will stop at the edge of the mist, no one is to enter without orders." Dozens of warships gradually stopped, forming a neat formation at the edge of the mist, their bows pointing into the mist, catapults already adjusted and ready to fire. The Vikings held their breath, their eyes fixed on the mist, cold sweat breaking out on their palms. This mist was too eerie, silently still, as if even the sound of the waves had been swallowed. Just then, roar. A sharp dragon roar suddenly erupted from the mist, breaking the dead silence. Immediately after, a crimson figure shot out of the mist like an arrow from a bowstring, heading straight for Stoic's flagship. "It's a monstrous nightmare," someone shouted. This monstrous nightmare had a wingspan of over 10 meters, claws as sharp as knives, and carried a scorching aura. It was clearly a dragon from the dragon's nest, having detected the approaching fleet and launched an attack. The monstrous nightmare was incredibly fast, reaching the warship in an instant, fire appearing in its mouth, clearly about to use its breath attack on the ship. "Beast! You seek death!" Stoic roared furiously, a ruthless glint in his eyes. Without hesitation, he sharply swung his right hand, and the meteor hammer in his grip, like a black lightning bolt, whistled through the air as it smashed towards the monstrous nightmare's neck. This meteor hammer was Stoic's prized weapon, with a chain 3 meters long and an iron ball at the end covered in sharp barbs, weighing a total of 100 catties. Normally, few could wield it, yet Stoic could throw it with one hand with extreme precision. Whoosh! Bang! The meteor hammer accurately struck the monstrous nightmare's neck, the barbs on the iron ball embedding deeply into the gaps of its scales, while the other 2 iron balls, by inertia, wrapped around its wings. The monstrous nightmare let out a painful shriek, lost its balance, and crashed towards the deck. Boom! The monstrous nightmare slammed heavily onto the deck, the immense impact causing the entire warship to shake violently. "Quick! Pin it down!" Stoic roared. The surrounding Vikings reacted, rushing forward. Some used ropes to bind its limbs, while others firmly pressed down on its head. The monstrous nightmare shrieked in anger, struggling violently, red flames spewing from its mouth. Fortunately, the Vikings were prepared and dodged, the flames only scorching the wooden planks on the deck, sending up thick smoke. Roar! The monstrous nightmare's struggles grew more intense, the iron chain around its neck pulled taut, making creaking sounds as if it could break at any moment. Stoic stepped forward, raising his giant axe high, its blade glinting with a cold light in the sun, capable of splitting the monstrous nightmare's head in two. Just as the axe was about to fall, Stoic's movement suddenly stopped. His gaze swept over the burned wooden planks on the deck, past the bandaged wounds of the crew, finally resting on the mist-shrouded sea. Only one thought was in his mind. They were trapped in this cursed place, unable to find any trace of the dragon's nest. Killing this monstrous nightmare was easy, but what next? If the fleet rashly entered the mist, they would only get lost, and might even encounter more dragon attacks, leading to even heavier losses. Only a dragon would know where the dragon's nest was. This thought exploded in his mind like thunder. Stoic took a deep breath, suppressing the surging anger in his heart. Instead of bringing down his axe, he slowly moved forward, gently resting the axe blade on the monstrous nightmare's neck. The cold axe blade pressed against the rough scales, perfectly wedged in the gap between them. With just a little force, it could slice open its throat. The surrounding Vikings were stunned. "Chieftain, what are you doing? Kill it quickly. Keeping it is just a disaster." "Silence." Stoic growled, his eyes sharp as knives, sweeping over his murmuring tribesmen. "If we kill it, who will lead us to the dragon's nest?" The single sentence instantly silenced the deck. The Vikings exchanged glances. Indeed, without a dragon to guide them, this vast mist was a dead end. Stoic's gaze returned to the monstrous nightmare, the axe blade pressing a little closer, his tone cold and firm. "Listen, beast. Either you lead us to your nest, or I'll split your head open right now and turn you into a pile of charcoal. The monstrous nightmare felt the deadly threat on its neck, struggling even more violently, its eyes filled with fear and rage, a low growl rumbling in its throat, crimson flames faintly churning in its mouth, yet it dared not easily spew them out. It knew that any slight movement would instantly cost it its life to that giant axe. Stoic stared intently into its eyes, its yellow pupils full of wild struggle, yet also hiding the instinct for survival. He increased the pressure on the axe blade, causing the monstrous nightmare's neck to sink slightly. I don't have the patience to waste on you. I'll give you 3 counts, either nod or die. 1. The monstrous nightmare's roar became urgent, its body taut like a drawn bow. 2. Stoic's arm exerted a slight force, and the axe blade had already carved a shallow white mark on the scales, a drop of scorching blood trickling down the blade. The monstrous nightmare suddenly stopped struggling, a hint of submission flashing in its yellow pupils. It sensed the ruthlessness of this Viking and understood that it had no choice. Resistance meant death, compliance might offer a glimmer of hope. 3. As soon as the word fell, the monstrous nightmare slowly lowered its head, no longer roaring, but just looking at Stoic with its wild eyes, a low, suppressed whimper escaping its throat, as if in compromise. A hint of understanding flashed in Stoic's eyes, but he did not relax his guard. The axe blade remained on its neck. Very good. Remember, if you dare to play tricks or lead us astray, I will make you die a more miserable death than any other dragon. Although the surrounding Vikings were still somewhat confused, seeing that their chieftain had made his decision, they dared not say more, only gripping their weapons tightly, vigilantly watching this dangerous monstrous nightmare. Stoic slowly raised the axe blade, but did not fully lower it, instead maintaining a posture ready to strike at any moment. He instructed his tribesmen nearby, untie the ropes on it, but leave the iron chain, don't give it a chance to play tricks. The Vikings immediately stepped forward, carefully untying the ropes wrapped around the monstrous nightmare, leaving only the thickest iron chain around its neck, one end firmly held by 2 strong Vikings. The monstrous nightmare stood up, shook off the dust on its body, and stretched its aching neck. It did not attack the surrounding Vikings, but instead turned its head to a direction deep within the mist, its gaze becoming resolute, then let out a long, low, ooh sound, as if indicating the way. Stoic's heart rejoiced, knowing it had understood his meaning. He immediately shouted to the helmsman, turn. Follow this dragon's direction, enter the mist. The helmsman responded and slowly turned, heading in the direction indicated by the monstrous nightmare. The other warships also followed suit, forming a neat fleet, trailing the flagship, and slowly sailed into the dense mist. Visibility in the mist was extremely low, only a dozen meters. But with the monstrous nightmare leading the way, the fleet avoided the hidden reefs and stone pillars in the mist. After sailing in the mist for about an hour, the mist ahead gradually thinned. Suddenly, the monstrous nightmare let out an excited shriek. The dragon's nest is ahead. The lookout shouted. The fleet sped up, passing through the last layer of mist, and the sight before them made all the Vikings exclaim in awe. A black beach appeared before their eyes, covered with smooth, rounded black pebbles, as if tempered by lava, gleaming faintly under the sun. Behind the beach stood a massive, pitch-black volcano, riddled with cracks. Red lava overflowed from these fissures, flowing down the mountain to form a scorching molten zone at its base. From the volcano's summit, black smoke billowed skyward, dyeing the surrounding heavens a somber gray. That's the dragon's nest. A Viking pointed at the volcano, his voice filled with excitement and awe. Stoic stood at the bow of the ship, gazing at the volcano before him, a resolute glint in his eyes. He had finally found the dragon's nest, the moment of vengeance was at hand. Shore up. Stoic commanded. Dozens of warships successively docked on the black pebble beach, their anchors plunging into the sea with a thump. The Vikings leapt from their warships, their feet landing on the black pebbles with a shush sound, as if stepping on sand. Stoic was the first to jump off the warship. He looked around, his gaze sweeping over the beach, but he saw no familiar figures. Lin, Hiccup, Astrid, Fishlegs, none of the reconnaissance team were present. His heart sank abruptly, and a wave of unease washed over him. The reconnaissance team had departed a day early to scout ahead. Logically, they should have already arrived here or be waiting nearby. Yet, they were nowhere to be seen. Had something happened to them? Stoic clenched his fists tightly, his knuckles white, muscles in his face twitching slightly. He forced himself to calm down. Now was not the time for worry. The revenge plan had begun and could not be disrupted by the disappearance of the reconnaissance team. He had to believe that Lin and Hiccup would surely overcome any danger. Everyone, listen up. Stoic took a deep breath, his voice regaining its usual authority. Immediately deploy the catapults. Target, the rock face at the base of the volcano. The Vikings responded in unison and sprang into action. They unloaded the catapults from the warships, quickly arranging them in a row on the beach. 20 catapults in total, neatly aimed at the rock face at the base of the volcano. Each catapult was loaded with a volcanic rock projectile the size of a millstone, and the dragon sinews on the catapults were pulled taut, ready to fire. Fishlegs' father, Old Goth, was the tribe's catapult commander. He approached Stoic and respectfully said, "Chief, the catapults are ready, they can be fired at any time." Stoic nodded, walked to the first catapult, personally adjusted its angle, and then shouted, "Fire!" Old Goth waved the flag in his hand and yelled, "Release!" The Vikings operating the catapults suddenly released the ropes in their hands, whoosh. The massive volcanic rock projectile flew towards the rock face at the base of the volcano with a whistling sound. The rock face was already riddled with cracks due to lava erosion, and the projectile accurately struck the center of the rock face. Boom! With a thunderous crash, the rock face was instantly shattered, scattering debris and filling the air with smoke and dust. A dark, gaping hole appeared before everyone's eyes, more than 10 meters wide and unfathomably deep, like a giant mouth devouring the surrounding light. After the huge rocks rolled into the hole, no sound was heard, indicating that the interior of the hole was extremely vast. Stoic gestured for everyone to be quiet. He raised the torch in his hand and walked to the mouth of the cave. The torchlight illuminated the area near the entrance but could not penetrate the darkness within. Only faint rustling sounds could be heard from deep inside, like the breathing of dragons or the rubbing of rocks. Fire another incendiary bomb. Stoic ordered. The Vikings immediately replaced the rock projectile on one catapult with an incendiary bomb, made from a mixture of dry grass and flammable liquid. It would burn continuously once ignited, illuminating the darkness. Release. The incendiary bomb was launched, soaring over Stoic's head, carrying roaring flames as it flew into the cave entrance. Whoosh! The flames exploded inside the cave entrance, illuminating a large area. In that instant, everyone clearly saw the scene inside the cave. It was a massive cavern, and its walls and floor were densely covered with dragons. There were monstrous nightmares, deadly natters, and gronkles, numbering in the hundreds. They were curled up in the cave, startled awake by the light of the incendiary bomb, and all raised their heads. Yellow, red, and blue eyes gleamed in the darkness, emitting a chilling light that made hearts pound. My heavens, so many dragons! A Viking instinctively exclaimed, his voice trembling slightly. Stoic took a deep breath, his shock immeasurable, but even more so was his vengeful fury. These dragons were the culprits who had attacked Burke Island and killed his tribesmen for years. For Burke Island. For our fallen tribesmen. Charge! Stoic raised his great axe and let out a deafening roar, then was the first to charge into the cave entrance. Charge! Inspired by Stoic's bravery, the Vikings raised their weapons, letting out fervent shouts, and followed Stoic, rushing into the cavern. The dragon swarm inside the cave was startled and panicked by this sudden attack. Hundreds of dragons simultaneously roared, spread their wings, and flew towards the cave entrance, trying to escape this dangerous place. Buzz! The deafening sound of huge wings flapping filled the air. The dragon swarm surged out of the cave entrance like a black tide, flying into the sky, and soon disappeared into the distant clouds. The Vikings who had rushed into the cave stared at the empty cavern, stunned. That's it. A Viking scratched his head, his face full of confusion. We haven't even made a move, why did they all run away? Old Goth walked up to Stoic and said, Chief, the dragons have all fled. Should we pursue them? Stoic frowned, a sense of unease in his heart. The dragon's reaction was too abnormal. There were so many of them. Logically, they should have fought back, not fled so easily. There must be something wrong here. Just then, boom. A loud bang suddenly came from deep within the cave. The entire cavern shook violently, and rocks from the ceiling began to fall. Stoik and the Vikings quickly dodged the falling rocks, expressions of terror on their faces. What's going on? What happened? Everyone discussed animatedly, their gazes fixed on the depths of the cave. They saw the rock wall in the depths of the cave suddenly crack open, and a huge fissure appeared. Red magma spewed out from the fissure, illuminating the dark cave. Immediately after, with a loud boom, the entire rock wall collapsed, and a massive black figure slowly rose from the ruins. It was an incredibly enormous dragon, at least 150 meters long, with a wingspan of 200 meters. Its entire body was covered in dark red scales that shimmered with a metallic luster, as if tempered by magma. Its head was massive, its eyes a deep green, and its 6 eyes stared at Stoik, who was at the forefront, exuding a suffocating pressure. Magma constantly dripped from its mouth, landing on the ground with a sizzling sound. Its neck was covered in protruding bone spurs, making it look exceptionally ferocious. Red Death! Stoik exclaimed, a hint of fear flashing in his eyes. This Red Death was even larger than he had imagined, and the pressure it exuded made it impossible to breathe. The Red Death let out a deafening roar, filled with anger and majesty, and the entire cave trembled with its roar. Its gaze swept over the Viking fleet outside the cave, its deep green eyes filled with murderous intent. Meanwhile, in another cave passage beneath the volcano, Lin's team was steadily advancing towards the exit, guided by Toothless's sonar. The passage grew wider and wider, and fresh sea breeze, carrying a faint salty scent, came from ahead. Oh, OOW. Mira turned her golden eyes slightly narrowed, looked at Lin, and barked twice. Lin's face lit up with joy as he stroked Myra's neck. The exit is right ahead, we'll be out soon. Myra's golden eyes rolled upwards as Lin stroked her, clearly in great comfort. That's great. Astrid said excitedly. Stormfly's right wing injury had healed considerably, and she was now excitedly flapping her wings. Just then, boom. A loud bang came from above, and the entire cave shook violently, with rocks falling from the ceiling. Immediately after, the Red Death's deafening roar clearly reached everyone's ears through the cracks in the rocks. Oh no. Lin's expression changed dramatically, and a strong sense of unease surged within him. That's the Red Death's voice. And, there's also the loud crash of catapults firing. The chief and the others have arrived. He turned to Hiccup, his tone urgent. Hiccup, the chief and the others must have found the dragon's nest and launched an attack. But the Red Death has evolved, they're no match for it. Hiccup's face also turned pale. He could imagine his father and the tribesmen facing the Red Death, and he was extremely anxious. What do we do? We need to get out and help them. Lin said to Mira, Mira, fly up and take us out. Lin's palms, gripping the dragon's saddle, were already sweating. Oh, Mira quickly pushed off with her 4 limbs, her broad wings creating a gust of wind pressure, flapping rapidly and instantly shooting out dozens of meters. Follow up. Lin shouted. Behind him, Hiccup, Astrid, Fishlegs, the Toughnut siblings, and Toughnut also sped up. The flapping of dragon wings and the sound of footsteps intertwined with the vibrations from above and the Red Death's roars, creating an extremely tense atmosphere. They didn't know that in the cave above, Stoik and the Vikings had already confronted the Red Death, and a battle of life and death was about to erupt. And they had to reach the battlefield as soon as possible, otherwise, Burke Island's revenge battle might turn into a brutal massacre. The light at the front of the passage grew brighter and brighter, the exit was already in sight. Lin could see the sunlight outside and feel the stronger sea breeze. But there was no relaxation in his heart. Instead, he grew more anxious. The Red Death's roar was getting closer and clearer, and that suffocating pressure even penetrated the rocks, reaching the underground passage. Faster. A little faster. Lin's voice trembled slightly, a sign of extreme urgency. Lin's knuckles, gripping the dragon's saddle, turned white, and the sweat in his palms soaked the leather. Just then, fragmented but warm memories suddenly flooded his mind. Those were the past experiences of the original owner of this body. He saw his younger self fall in the snow, and it was the Viking aunt next door who helped him up and gave him warm roasted venison. He saw the roof leaking snow in winter, and several villagers braving the wind and snow to help his family repair it, their exhaled white breath mixing with laughter. He also saw his parents' resolute backs as they shielded him from a sudden dragon attack before they left. That was the last time he saw them. And whenever danger arrived, it was always Stoic who charged at the front with his great axe, the axe blade not only cleaving through the dragon's threat but also serving as a shield protecting all the villagers. Once, when he was being chased by a dragon, the chief grabbed him and pulled him behind him, waving his great axe to force the dragon back, then patted his shoulder with a rough hand and said, "Don't be afraid, child, I'm here." These memories surged like a tide, carrying body heat and the scent of everyday life, and Lin's eyes warmed slightly. He could feel the lingering obsession of the body's original owner, gratitude towards the villagers, longing for his parents, and, more importantly, a desire to protect everyone on Burke Island. "Don't worry," Lin murmured in his heart, as if making a promise to the original owner of this body, "You let me live a second life, and I will never let anything happen to them. I will protect everyone." As soon as he finished speaking, Lin's eyes suddenly narrowed, his heart in his chest thumped heavily with a thud, then accelerated like a drum. His blood seemed to ignite, and a warm red-blue current surged rapidly through his veins. That was the dragon-taming power hidden within him. This power transformed into countless invisible threads, extending from his body and heart, gently wrapping around Mira in front of him. Mira seemed to sense this familiar yet unfamiliar power. Her golden dragon eyes suddenly brightened a few shades, and she let out a trembling growl from her throat. A surge of energy also rose within her, transforming into corresponding threads that extended towards Lin. The moment the two invisible threads intertwined and woven in the air, oh! Mira let out a long howl that penetrated the passage, and red-blue flickers of light suddenly appeared in the gaps of her scales. Her already broad wings violently flapped, creating a wind pressure that almost made the dragons behind her pause for a moment. Her body shot out like an arrow from a bowstring, instantly covering the remaining distance of the passage. Lin subconsciously reached out a hand and gently placed it on Mira's neck. Beneath his palm, he could clearly feel the muscles, containing terrifying power, slightly expanding. Each contraction brought surging vitality, rising and falling like breathing. He could clearly perceive Mira's emotions, the same anxiety as his, the same determination, and a tacit understanding of their shared purpose. "Quick! Follow Lin." Seeing this, Hiccup immediately patted Toothless's neck and chased after Mira's retreating figure. Astrid's Stormfly, though still injured, was also swept up by this momentum, flapping her left wing to keep up. Fishlegs' Meatball, the Natter siblings' Deadly Natter, and Snotlout's Hookfang also accelerated. The roars of the dragons and the whoosh of flapping wings intertwined. The moment they burst out of the passage exit, dazzling sunlight and a strong smell of gunpowder smoke rushed towards them. Lin narrowed his eyes, seeing Stoic confronting the Red Death with his great axe on the volcanic platform not far away. The Vikings were circled with their weapons, and the monstrous nightmare, which had been coerced into leading the way, was cowering in a corner, trembling. The Red Death's evolved body was even larger than in his memory, with dark red patterns on its black wings, emitting methane gas from its mouth, clearly ready to attack. "Mira, charge! Block it!" Lin's voice no longer trembled, instead, it carried an unprecedented determination, and the red-blue dragon taming power surged again. Mira understood, letting out a long howl, and dove towards the Red Death's side. The red-blue glow on her wings carved a dazzling arc in the sunlight. This belated reinforcement finally arrived at the battlefield at the most critical moment. Mira's wings spread out like a curtain of dark ink, and the gale generated by her dive made Lin's black hair fly wildly. Mira didn't pause at all. Her neck retracted sharply backward, and her chest cavity visibly expanded, as if she were swallowing the surrounding air. The traces of air movement were clearly visible, and a scorching rumble of gurgle gurgle came from her throat. The sound of combustible gases, drawn in and gathered inside her body, being ignited by Mira's internal high temperature. Lin's palm, pressed against Mira's neck, could clearly feel the agitation of the energy inside her body. Mira's internal high temperature was fiercely scorching the accumulated combustible gases, and the reddish-blue glow in the gaps between her scales grew more intense, gradually merging with the orange-red firelight emanating from her chest. Before long, tiny sparks began to emerge from the corners of Mira's mouth, and even the surrounding air was warped by the heat. "Mira, go!" Lin's roar erupted simultaneously with Mira's dragon roar. Before the words finished, Mira sharply lowered her head, thrusting her neck forward. The scorching heat in her throat suddenly erupted, A fireball shot out of her mouth first, and immediately afterward, the compressed flame mass, released from Myra's control, expanded like a volcanic eruption. This fireball was as large as Mira herself, its surface wrapped in flickering scarlet flame waves. It moved so fast that it drew a dazzling line of fire, leaving a scorching trajectory in the air. At this moment, the Red Death slightly raised its head. A trace of ferocity flashed in its deep green pupils. It opened its massive maw, and green methane gas slowly seeped out from its throat. Sparks were already flickering on its tongue. It was clearly about to unleash its deadly flame breath. But just as it finished charging, Myra's fireball struck its head with the precision of a cannonball. Boom! The loud noise shook debris loose from the crater walls. The fireball exploded atop the Red Death's head, sending flame waves and shattered rocks scattering in all directions. The high temperature instantly scorched several scales on its crown. The Red Death's massive head was violently thrown backward by the impact, causing the bone spurs on its neck to shake. The pale green methane gas was ignited by the flames, exploding in a small burst of fire at its mouth, instantly interrupting the breath attack that was ready to launch. Was that a fireball? Stoic, standing on the volcano island beach, suddenly gripped his great axe tightly. His rough face first showed shock, which was then replaced by ecstasy. He looked in the direction the fireball had flown from, just in time to see the investigation team rushing out from the other side of the mountain. He just happened to see Hiccup riding Toothless flying out from one side of the mountain and arriving behind Mira. Astrid's Stormfly, though still flapping her injured right wing, maintained a fierce demeanor. Fishlegs, the Gnat siblings, and Snotlout followed closely, the silhouettes of the dragons standing out clearly in the sunlight. They're back. They really are back. Stoic's voice held a subtle tremor. The worry that had weighed on his heart dissipated significantly the moment he saw the team. The Vikings who witnessed this terrifying attack erupted in chaos, their tense expressions replaced by shock. Some instinctively gaped, forgetting to grip the weapons in their hands. Others pointed toward Mira, unable to form complete sentences. Their eyes were full of disbelief. They had never seen such a swift dragon breath, one that could forcefully interrupt the Red Death's breath attack. But before anyone could recover, an even fiercer explosion suddenly rang out. The blue-red energy residue from Myra's fireball reacted with the Red Death's secretions. With a bang, the second explosion was more violent than the first. The scales on the Red Death's head first cracked and were then blown off. Magma-like blood gushed from the wound, streaming down the bone spurs on its neck, dripping onto the black beach with a sizzle, instantly steaming into a wisp of white smoke. Roar! The Red Death finally snapped out of its agony, letting loose a furious roar that shook the volcano. This roar carried an overwhelming pressure of destruction. The sound wave acted like an invisible giant hammer, slamming violently into the surrounding Vikings. Several Vikings who were close by were directly thrown several meters away, landing heavily on the black beach. Those slightly further away felt piercing pain in their eardrums and staggered backward, clutching their ears. Even the gravel on the edge of the volcano was shaken by the sound wave and rolled toward the crater, sparking bursts of fire. Scatter quickly. Get behind the rocks. Stoic reacted the fastest, shouting while waving his hand to signal his tribesmen to take cover. The Vikings could no longer afford to be shocked and scattered desperately, scrambling away. Some squeezed into the crevices of the platform's rocks, others hid behind thick boulders, and some tightly gripped the trebuchet frames, terrified of being affected by the Red Death's roar again. The Red Death's roar echoed like thunder over Volcano Island. The sound waves rebounded off the rock walls, shaking the black pebbles on the beach until they rattled. Mira and Lin, who bore the brunt of the attack, suffered a much stronger impact than the Vikings. The sound waves were like solid blades, causing sharp pain in Lin's eardrums. His head buzzed, and his vision blurred. He couldn't help but let out a painful scream. Ah! He desperately covered his ears, his body trembling violently on the dragon saddle. Mira was also severely agitated by the dragon roar carrying the pressure. Her golden dragon pupils contracted. She violently shook her head, her wings flapping restlessly, stirring up gusts of chaotic wind, but still unable to dispel the ringing in her ears. But when she turned her head and caught sight of Lin's pale face, biting his teeth fiercely to endure the pain, her agitation instantly transformed into rage. This was the first time she had so clearly felt Lin's suffering. Mira suddenly raised her head and let out a dragon roar that shook the heavens. The red and blue dragon taming power around her surged wildly, actually condensing into a tangible pressure that swept out like a black storm. The Red Death felt this challenging pressure, and its rage intensified. It released its own suffocating destructive pressure without reservation. On one side was terrifying pressure, dark red like magma. On the other was the intertwining red and blue pressure, like heavenly might, awe-inspiring and inviolable. The two forces collided thunderously in the center of the black beach. The air was torn into countless fragments, erupting in a deafening roar. Gusts of wind instantly condensed into swirling pillars, shattered rocks whistled past like bullets, black pebbles were swept into the sky and then slammed down hard, and even the distant ocean waves were stirred up relentlessly. Vikings near the storm were blown off their feet, scrambling to the ground and desperately clinging to the rocks. However, this ultimate confrontation did not last long. Although the Red Death's dark red pressure was tyrannical and savage, it could not withstand the resilient heart of guardianship within Myra's heavenly pressure. Beneath the pressure lay not only world-destroying power but also an unyielding will. With a muffled sound of energy collision, the two pressures suddenly dissipated like punctured bladders. The violent wind pillars instantly lost momentum, and the debris and dust caught in the air rained down. The surging waves slowly calmed, and the black beach, previously shrouded in pressure, finally returned to peace, except that the ground was covered with trenches of varying depths, rocks were shattered into pieces, and everywhere bore the tragic marks of the recent confrontation. Residual energy currents still subtly swirled on the beach, eventually fading into the sea breeze. The moment the two pressures dissipated, Lin took a sharp breath. The piercing pain in his eardrums gradually receded, replaced by a dizzy spell. He slowly straightened up, leaning on the dragon's saddle, fine cold sweat beading on his forehead, his gaze still fixed on the Red Death. Mira, however, stood tall and proud, her golden dragon eyes sharp as blades. Red and blue intertwining light flowed between her scales. Although her aura was slightly disordered from the previous pressure confrontation, she still exuded an unyielding, unassailable domineering. She gently nudged Lin's hand, as if to signal, "I'm fine," and let out a low dragon growl, a warning to the Red Death. The Red Death's 6 pale green pupils were now stained crimson. Having been suppressed by Myra's divine might just now, this overlord felt an unprecedented humiliation. In this brief moment of standoff, the scout team seized the opportunity to attack. Astrid quickly maneuvered Stormfly, and the explosive stingers on her tail were accurately shot at the Red Death's ribs. A series of explosions, bang, 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 rang out. When the smoke cleared, only a black mark was left on its scales. Fishlegs urgently ordered Meatball to spray the maximum dose of lava bombs. The magma splattered and exploded on the Red Death's knee, but it merely slid off the scales, not even melting a single one. These dragon scales were even harder and more heat-resistant than rock. Toughnut and his siblings had Baff spray all its gas, and Belch ignite the strongest flames. A huge ball of fire enveloped the Red Death's lower body, but after the smoke cleared, its scales were only blackened, completely unharmed. Snotlout was too stunned to speak, and Hookfang growled uneasily. The Vikings went from shock to despair. The tribe's strongest combined attack was merely an insignificant itch to the Red Death. These ineffective attacks completely ignited the Red Death's fury. It no longer bothered with the pressure confrontation with Mira. Its colossal body slowly turned, its 6 pale green eyes fixed on Mira, who posed the greatest threat, but its right foot slowly lifted. That foot was the size of a warship, its scales still stained with lava fragments and black grit. Each toe was as sharp as polished obsidian. The gale it stirred up as it lifted carried scorching heat, instantly casting a massive shadow that completely covered the area where Stoik and several Vikings stood. The veins on Stoik's hand, gripping his giant axe, bulged, and his knuckles turned white from the force. He could clearly see the rough scale patterns on the bottom of the foot, and even smell the strong sulfur and scorching lava sent from the scales. The mountain-like pressure made him gasp for breath. He instinctively wanted to raise his giant axe to block, but his gaze swept over his cowering tribesmen behind him, then at the massive foot capable of crushing rocks, and he instantly understood it would be futile. The weight of that foot was enough to crush him, the rocks behind him, and his tribesmen into powder, leaving no room for resistance. Father! Hiccup's roar, like a sharp knife, instantly pierced the deadly silence of the beach. Flying over on Toothless, his fingers were white from gripping the saddle too tightly, his voice filled with a desperate sob. Toothless. Quick. Faster. Please. Hiccup's heart felt as if an invisible hand was squeezing it, each beat a tearing pain. That was his only father, the pillar of Burke Island. He couldn't watch his father die before him. Toothless clearly sensed his rider's urgency. A humming resonance emanated from its throat, growing louder and louder, as if energy was accumulating within its body. At first, only the scales at its tail end glowed with a faint blue light. That light quickly spread along its spine, like a blue stream, all the way to its neck, throat, and finally, even its black head was dyed a pure, deep blue. Its body trembled slightly, not from fear, but from the frantic surge of energy within. Even the surrounding air began to vibrate, forming concentric blue ripples. Roar. Toothless suddenly tilted its head back, and a bright blue plasma ray shot out from its mouth. This ray was not as violent as Myra's fireballs, but it carried a sharpness that could penetrate anything, cutting a straight blue line through the air and accurately striking the scales on the inner side of the Red Death's foot. With a hiss, the moment the ray touched the scales, black smoke emerged, and the struck scales and skin were instantly melted and pierced through. Roar, roar, roar. The Red Death shrieked in pain, its descending foot abruptly halted. The downward momentum was forcibly stopped, and its foot lifted back an inch. It was this inch that gave Hiccup his chance. Hiccup almost instinctively controlled Toothless to dive. Toothless's claws were spread, ready to grab at any moment. It flew precisely over Stoic's head, its front claws firmly hooking Stoic's leather armor, its wings rapidly flapping, using the upward force to fly towards the rocks on the other side of the beach. Stoic felt a sudden tightening around his waist, and he was yanked into the air. The wind howled in his ears. He looked back to see the Red Death's foot land with a rumble, where he had just stood. The black pebbles were instantly crushed into powder, and a half-meter deep pit formed in the ground, with lava slowly seeping from its bottom. It wasn't until they landed behind the rocks that Hiccup dared to let go. He leaned against the rock, panting heavily, his chest heaving. Cold sweat streamed down his cheeks, dripping onto the ground and spreading into a small wet patch. Stoic patted his shoulder, his voice hoarse with lingering fear. Good boy. Thank you, Toothless. Toothless lay beside them, the blue light on its spine gradually dimming, its breathing becoming rapid. Clearly, this attack had exhausted most of its strength. This was its first time unleashing a full power breath attack all at once. Even it seemed a bit bewildered, its green eyes full of confusion. Just then, an inky black figure, enveloped in a heatwave, streaked across the beach like lightning. Lin's voice, imbued with dragon-taming power, clearly reached everyone's ears. Mira, hold its movements. Don't give it a chance to breathe fire. Myra's speed was even faster than before, creating a fierce gale as her wings spread. She chose not to charge head-on, but instead circled to the Red Death's rear side. Orange-red flames had already ignited in the gaps of her right wing's scales, flickering with her movements, as if burning directly on her wing. With a dull thud, Myra's right wing slammed hard into the Red Death's shoulder. Flames instantly brushed against the Red Death's scales. Although they couldn't burn through, the attack made the Red Death pause. Its massive body tilted slightly to the left, and a crack appeared in its scales. And Lin, the instant Mira struck, leapt from Myra's dragon head. His right hand gripped the longsword on his back, the dragon pattern carved into its hilt gleaming in the sunlight. Red and blue dragon taming power surged rapidly along his arm, like two intertwining streams, instantly pouring into the blade. With a hum, the longsword was enveloped in flames. Crimson flames danced on the blade, their temperature so high that even the surrounding air began to distort. Lin adjusted his posture in midair, his legs slightly bent, his body like a fully drawn bow. As he landed on the bone spur on the Red Death's neck, he leapt up with the impact, and the longsword, trailing flames, cut a perfect arc. With a hiss, it actually carved a half-foot-long gash between the Red Death's scales. Lava-like blood gushed from the wound, darker in color than ordinary dragon blood, glowing dark red. As soon as it seeped out, it was scorched by the sword's flames, steaming white smoke into the air, which filled with a pungent smell of rust and sulfur. The Red Death roared in pain, violently shaking its massive head, trying to dislodge Lin. The bone spurs on its neck swayed with the movement. But Lin had already anticipated this. He gripped tightly onto a gap between the scales with his left hand, and his body swung like a monkey onto the Red Death's head. While Lin dodged the shaking, he swung his longsword down again. This time, he aimed at the Red Death's shattered scales, where they were slightly upturned from previous attacks, making it the weakest point of defense. With a thump, the blade pierced in unimpeded, sinking nearly half a foot deep. The Red Death let out a painful roar, full of fury. It tried to grab Lin with its front claws, but its massive body was too sluggish to turn. Its claw was only halfway extended when Lin had already climbed up the bone spurs, avoiding the fatal attack. Mira, meanwhile, cooperated tacitly below. Mira felt that as the battle time and fighting will increased, the bone spurs on her limbs and wings were now completely enveloped in crimson flames. The color of the flames was deeper than before, even tinged with orange-yellow. This was a sign of continuously rising temperature. Each claw strike carried a heat capable of melting iron. She leapt up, her front claws grabbing at the Red Death's knee. The flames directly melted a scale, and dark red blood instantly flowed from the wound. The Red Death roared and kicked at Mira, but Mira had already anticipated its movement. With a flap of her wings, she deftly dodged, and took the opportunity to strike the Red Death's knee with the bone spurs on her wings. The flames brushed against the scales, leaving a charred mark. The Red Death staggered back half a step from the impact, its massive body hitting the rock wall, causing gravel to fall. This gave Lin an opportune moment. Lin ran down the Red Death's neck, the flames on his sword burning brighter. Dragon-taming power flowed rapidly within him, allowing him to clearly perceive the fluctuations of energy within the Red Death. He could hear the contraction of muscles beneath its scales, and even feel the position of its bones. He aimed at a slightly upturned scale, loosened by Mira's previous claw attack, its edge still stained with lava blood. Lin braced his feet against a bone spur, his arm muscles bulging, veins protruding beneath his skin, and thrust his longsword with all his might. With a thump, the blade fully embedded, and dark red blood gushed out along the blade, splashing all over Lin. Lin's body trembled, but he couldn't stop. The Red Death let out an earth-shattering roar, violently smashing its massive head against the rock wall. The rock instantly shattered, and debris rained down like a storm. Lin, however, clung tightly to the sword hilt, using the recoil to flip onto the Red Death's forehead, the sword tip pointing directly at its dark green left eye that was the Red Death's most vulnerable spot, with no thick scales for protection, only a thin eyelid. Now! Lin roared, his voice full of determination. He twisted his wrist, and the longsword, trailing flames, thrust towards the Red Death's eye socket. The flames had even scorched the Red Death's eyelid. The Red Death's pupils suddenly constricted. It tried to turn its head to dodge, but its head's turning speed simply couldn't keep up with Lin's movements. The blade plunged violently into the eye socket. With a pop, murky eye fluid mixed with dark red blood gushed out, splashing onto Lin's face. The scalding temperature and strong metallic smell made him tremble even more violently. To protect his tribe, he had no choice but to do this. Roar! The Red Death completely erupted in fury. This was the first time in its life it had suffered such severe injury. Its massive body stood up, trembling violently. Its muscles rapidly swelled as if inflated, and its already enormous size increased by another circle. Its scales were stretched by the muscles, and what gushed from the wound was no longer blood, but scalding lava. The dark red blood and lava mixed together, and the lava actually stopped the bleeding, turning the wound into a rock-like scab. Its surface temperature began to skyrocket. The air was scorched and distorted. The Vikings in the distance could even see the light around the Red Death wavering, and the black pebbles beneath the Red Death turned red hot. Lin felt a bone-chilling heat emanate from his feet. He looked down and saw that the soles of his boots had begun to burn, the leather curling up, and even the iron nails in the soles glowed red. Even worse, the high temperature was creeping up his pant legs, the fabric on his calves had already caught fire. Any later, and it would likely stick to his skin, and his body was starting to feel uncomfortable. He knew that if he stayed any longer, he would be roasted alive. The Red Death's surface temperature had exceeded his endurance limit, possibly even approaching 1000 degrees. He abruptly released the sword hilt, leaving the longsword embedded in the Red Death's eye socket, like an unyielding flag. Mira! Lin shouted downwards, his voice hoarse from the heat. Lin bent his legs and leapt forcefully, his bare feet and calves directly exposed. He began to fall due to gravity, flipping in the air to adjust his posture. He knew Mira would catch him. Mira did not disappoint him. She was already prepared, her wings fully spread like a burning, fiery night sky, rushing up quickly from below and steadily cradling Lin on her back. Mira flew swiftly, still anxiously glancing at Lin's reddening, blistering feet. Awu tilde, Myra's anxious voice came, mixed with a hint of anger and worry. Lin endured the discomfort in his feet, one hand gripping the dragon saddle, the other gently stroking Myra's neck scales, forcing a strained smile. He said, "It's okay, Mira, thanks to you." Soon after Lin finished speaking, he felt a wave of heat from behind, as if a huge fireball was burning there. He looked back, his dark green eyes filled with a crazed killing intent. It was staring at him, a gurgling sound coming from its throat. Methane ignited instantly in its mouth, and a dragon breath covering tens of meters swept towards them from hundreds of meters away. The scorching hot air almost seared his lungs. Lin stared at the dragon breath, imbued with destructive aura, his pupils contracting sharply. His roar pierced through the heatwave. Mira. Dodge, quickly. Oh. Mira let out a sharp dragon's roar, and at the same time, Myra's response echoed in Lin's mind. Her wings tensed abruptly, like two giant fans burning with fierce flames, shaking violently. A powerful airflow exploded around her, and her body accelerated sharply, darting forward like an arrow released from a bowstring. Just as the dragon breath was about to engulf them, Mira twisted her body flexibly, her massive dragon body drawing a perilous arc, narrowly carrying Lin away from the deadly high-temperature zone. Lin clung desperately to the dragon saddle, his knuckles white from the effort, the fierce wind whistling in his ears. The Red Death's dragon breath missed, and furious crimson surged in its black vertical pupils. It scanned its surroundings, its gaze suddenly locking onto the dozens of Viking warships anchored by the sea. A deafening roar erupted from its throat. The next second, another scorching dragon breath spewed from its mouth, like a crimson fire snake, sweeping from left to right, instantly engulfing the warships across the entire sea area. The wood of the ships instantly caught fire under the high temperature, thick smoke billowed, and the Vikings on deck cried out, scattering and leaping into the icy seawater, splashing dense sprays. Flames devoured the warships, the crackling sound of burning intertwining with the sound of waves, creating a chaotic scene. At least the warriors are safe. Lin saw them all hide in the sea. Lin looked at the burning warships and the out-of-control Red Death, his brows furrowed, his voice tinged with gravity. It seems the Red Death has completely lost its mind. This guy's state, methane gas is actually ignited directly by its surface temperature, and its dragon breath is almost unstoppable. Lin frowned deeply, gripping the dragon saddle tightly, his mind racing. The Red Death's surface defense was already abnormally strong, and now it was likely in a state of extreme rage. In this state, magma flowed on its body, allowing wounds to stop bleeding quickly. Although the Red Death was sluggish, if it hit with its foot or claw, the consequences would be unimaginable. Even more terrifying was its dragon breath, that fire line capable of covering hundreds of meters. If it sprayed it towards the beach, Burke Island's fleet and tribesmen would be reduced to charcoal. Just then, Lin suddenly felt a familiar energy fluctuation. It was the red and blue dragon taming power. Mira was mobilizing energy to resonate with him. Oh! Myra's firm dragon roar sounded, and Lin looked at Mira in surprise, saying, "You want to try the dragon breath you learned with Toothless for a month again, right?" A sharp smile played on Lin's lips, a flicker of excitement in his eyes, as he began to fully control the dragon taming power to resonate with Mira. He patted Myra's neck, his voice full of fervor. "Mira, let it see our true power." He paused, then added, "First, provoke it, lure it high into the sky, then we'll do this, and that." Mira understood. She abruptly turned and charged towards the Red Death, accumulating power in her mouth to once again spit out a fireball. The fireball flew rapidly towards the Red Death's body, then quickly soared into the sky. Boom! Boom! The fireballs exploded on the Red Death's body. This attack caused no substantial damage but utterly enraged the Red Death. It let out a furious roar, its enormous wings slowly unfolding. Although each flap seemed clumsy, it carried undeniable killing intent, following Mira into the high sky. The higher they went, the fiercer the wind, and the colder the air. Myra's speed increased, the airflow generated by her flapping wings churning the surrounding clouds. As they broke through the last layer of clouds, Lin looked down. The sea surface was like a vast blue silk ribbon, Burke Island's fleet in the distance shrunk into tiny sparks of fire, and the volcanic island was like a black gem, embedded in the blue silk. The cold wind at 1,000 meters high howled past, blowing Lin's hair and clothes backward, slightly alleviating the burning sensation he had felt earlier. The Red Death still pursued relentlessly. Its flight posture was clumsy, and its wings flapped slowly, but its large wing area meant each flap propelled it a great distance forward. The fierce winds at 1,000 meters high cut like knives across Lin's cheeks. He tightened his grip on the dragon saddle, his gaze fixed on the Red Death chasing behind, and said in a deep voice, "Mira, now. Extinguish the flames, hide in the clouds." Mira immediately understood. The leaping flames around her body suddenly retracted, leaving only the lingering warmth on her scales. She folded her wings, diving into the thick clouds beside them like a black lightning bolt. The clouds instantly closed, like a giant wad of cotton completely obscuring her figure. The Red Death pounced into the empty space where Mira had vanished, its massive body hovering high in the sky, its 6 dark green eyes wildly spinning in their sockets, glowing with bloodthirsty red light. Its neck twisted slightly, every scale bristling with vigilance. Its huge head swept back and forth through the clouds, continuously emitting low roars that made the surrounding cloud wisps tremble, as if proclaiming its fury at being toyed with. Deep within the clouds, Myra's aura was suppressed to an extreme low, her wings almost motionless, only slowly adjusting her posture with the airflow. Lin lay prone on her back, his heart pounding, his fingertips tightly gripping the dragon saddle, his gaze fixed on the Red Death's movements through a gap in the clouds. Suddenly, a black shadow shot out from the clouds. Myra's long-charged fireball, like a burning meteor, streaked directly towards the Red Death's left wing with a sharp whoosh. Boom! The fireball exploded at the base of the wing, the scorching shockwave instantly tearing through the tough wing membrane. Charred membrane and shattered scales flew, and a 10-meter-wide hole appeared, hot blood gushing from the rupture, congealing into droplets and falling through the air. Roar! The Red Death let out a deafening roar of rage, its left wing violently flapping, its body instantly losing balance, stumbling in the high sky. Before it could regain its footing, Mira had already flashed past like a ghost, and its right wing received another precise fireball strike. With another loud bang, a large hole was also blasted open in the right wing membrane. The utterly enraged Red Death's eyes surged with destructive madness. It stopped searching for Myra's trace, suddenly opening its massive maw, and a scorching dragon breath, reeking of sulfur, spewed forth, sweeping across the surroundings like a crimson pillar of light. The high temperature instantly devoured the surrounding clouds. The white cloud wisps were roasted, steaming and dissipating, turning into wisps of water vapor. The once thick cloud layer was quickly cleared, revealing a clear high sky. Mira lost her hiding place, instantly exposed in the Red Death's line of sight. The Red Death's 6 vertical pupils simultaneously lit up with dazzling red light, like 6 stars locking onto a target, staring intently at Mira, a violent aura sweeping out. The moment the Red Death's 6 vertical pupils locked onto its target, its massive body suddenly accelerated, charging toward Mira like a runaway meteor. It opened its cavernous mouth, its sharp fangs glinting coldly, and a brutal roar surged from its throat. It lunged at Mira with terrifying momentum, a stench of sulfur mixed with the pungent smell of methane washing over them. Mira, veer sideways. Lin roared, gripping the dragon saddle tightly, the dragon taming power surging within him, connecting him closely to Myra's consciousness. Mira instantly understood, tilting her wings sharply to one side. Her huge dragon body spun like a top, narrowly avoiding the fatal bite. The Red Death's fangs scraped past Myra's scales, sending up a shower of sparks. Now. Dive. Lin's voice held the desperate resolve of burning one's boats. Mira folded her wings and plummeted downward like a sharp sword. The wind screamed past their ears, and the ground rushed up toward them. Lin closed his eyes, pouring all the dragon-taming power within him into Mira without reserve. Red and blue energy halos surged around him like a tide toward Myra's body, the light dazzlingly bright. Mira let out a sky-shattering dragon roar, her mouth wide open. The energy within her and the power supplied by Lin converged and spun before her muzzle. Initially, the red and blue energy sphere compressed continuously before her mouth, growing brighter and brighter, gradually shifting from an interweaving of red and blue to a scorching orange-red, and then, under extreme compression and rotation, transforming into a blue-white plasma sphere. The surrounding air was violently sucked in, forming a rotating ring of air current around the energy sphere, emitting a sharp buzzing sound. Every final effort to control the compressed energy sphere and prevent it from losing control was accompanied by Myra's body trembling. This was the absolute limit of what she could withstand. Lin felt his mind reel, as if countless steel needles were pricking his nerves. He clutched his head tightly, his vision darkening in flashes, his consciousness hovering on the brink of collapse. The Red Death behind them sensed the fatal threat and gave up on biting. Its massive maw slowly opened, and dense green methane gas emerged from deep within its throat, flickering with a dangerous, faint glow. It was clearly about to unleash its fire breath. At this critical moment, Mira spun around abruptly and fiercely blasted out the plasma energy sphere, which contained all of their combined power. The blue-white energy sphere shot toward the Red Death's throat like a bolt of lightning, moving at a speed beyond its limit. Boom! With a deafening explosion, the energy sphere accurately hit its target and detonated inside the Red Death's throat. Blinding blue-white light instantly engulfed its head. The Red Death's 6 green eyes widened. It instinctively spread its massive wings to slow down. Its speed had just begun to decrease when the 2 pairs of large holes were rapidly torn open by the gale, shattering its wings completely. After the blue-white light subsided, the Red Death's throat was severed, sending scalding flesh and shattered scales flying everywhere. Violent energy and a plasma storm swept out, completely engulfing the Red Death's entire upper body. The shockwave generated by the explosion tossed Lin violently, like an invisible giant hand. He tumbled through the air like a kite with a broken string, his consciousness completely sinking into darkness as he passed out. Even more terrifyingly, the plasma energy sphere ignited the Red Death's internal methane-storing organs. Massive explosions rang out one after another, and its fragmented body became enveloped in raging fire, resembling a burning meteor. Lin's unconscious body, like a kite with a broken string, plummeted rapidly, caught in the shockwave of the explosion. His clothes were ripped and flapped loudly in the gale, and blood seeped from residual burns and bruises on his body, tracing a dazzling red streak in the sunlight. His eyes were tightly shut, his brows slightly furrowed from the lingering pain. His entire body tumbled lifelessly, falling straight toward the black beach. Awoo! Myra's dragon roar carried heart-wrenching urgency. Having just expended most of her energy to fire the plasma energy sphere, her body was still trembling slightly, yet the instant Lin was thrown off, she desperately changed direction. Her golden dragon eyes locked onto the falling figure. Her wings erupted with strength far beyond their limit, the black appendages beating so fast they were almost a blur, creating a vortex of air high above, forcing her speed to its absolute maximum. Her dive path resembled a black lightning bolt, streaking past the Red Death's burning wreckage. The Red Death's fragmented body was falling even faster, with burning scales, shattered wing membranes, and scalding dark red blood constantly raining down, like a lethal shower of fire. Mira had to both chase Lin and dodge the falling debris, yet she did not slow down at all. The low growl in her throat was constant with anxiety, and every flap of her wings was executed with all her might. Just a second before Lin was about to fall into the sea of fire, Mira finally caught up to him. She suddenly spread her wings, the massive appendages unfurling like a curtain across the sky, and forcibly caught Lin with her talons. Mira immediately beat her wings and descended slowly, holding Lin tightly against her chest. Her dragon eyes were filled with relief and lingering terror. She gently nudged his unresponsive cheek with her nose, uttering a whimpering moan in her throat. Meanwhile, the Vikings on the Black Beach had erupted into chaos. Lin, hiccup, riding toothless, rushed toward the seaside like a madman. The hearts of the investigation team members felt as if they were being tightly squeezed by an invisible hand. Stoic gripped his great axe, his knuckles white. His rugged face was etched with anxiety as he stared intently at the sky, emitting a suppressed growl from his throat. Just as everyone's hearts were in their throats, the Red Death's massive, burning body abruptly plunged, like a moving volcano, instantly blocking their view. The enormous shadow enveloped the entire beach, and the scorching heat wafted over them, causing the Vikings to instinctively take half a step back. They could not see Lin or Mira, only the massive burning shadow drawing closer, descending with a harsh whistling sound toward the area at the foot of the volcano. Boom! A tremendous explosion erupted, more violent than any previous blast. The Red Death's body slammed hard into the rocks at the foot of the volcano, instantly shattering. Scalding lava spewed out, mixing with burning flesh and broken scales, forming a towering fire mushroom cloud. The red firelight stained half the sky, and black smoke shot straight up into the clouds, turning the surrounding cloud layers gray-black. The shockwave from the explosion swept across the entire volcano island. Pebbles on the black beach were tossed into the air, the wreckage of distant warships shook violently, and the Vikings had to cling desperately to nearby rocks to barely maintain their footing. The fire mushroom cloud lingered in the sky for a long time before slowly dispersing, leaving behind a winding trail of black smoke that drifted gently in the air. The beach was silent. The Vikings slowly raised their heads, their faces still etched with the shock of the explosion. They stared intently at the area at the foot of the volcano, which was now covered by a sea of fire, utterly silent. The cheers and shouts from moments ago seemed to have been completely swallowed by the massive explosion, leaving only the sound of waves hitting the beach and the distant crackling of the burning fire. They didn't know what had happened to Lin and Mira. The enormous fire mushroom cloud had obscured everything. They hadn't seen Mira save Lin, nor had they seen if the two of them managed to avoid the falling wreckage. Massive worry intertwined with the shock of having just witnessed victory, leaving everyone silent, their faces reflecting complex emotions, disbelief at the Red Death's demise, trepidation over the brutality of the fight, and deep concern for the safety of Lin and Mira. Hiccup tremblingly raised his hand, pointing toward the sea of fire at the foot of the volcano, his voice so hoarse it was barely audible. Lin. Mira. Toothless growled beneath him, his black pupils filled with anxiety. He wanted to rush over but was held firmly back by Hiccup. Stoic took a deep breath, suppressing the unease in his heart. His voice was heavier than ever. Wait for the flames to dissipate, then we'll go look. No one refuted him, and no one spoke. The Vikings stood silently on the beach, gazing at the burning sea of fire. Their hearts remained suspended in midair, tightly wrapped by the towering flames, feeling both scorching and heavy. This victory had come too tragically, too breathtakingly. At this moment, they didn't even have the strength to cheer, only endless silence and waiting. The flames gradually receded amidst the mingling of lava and seawater. Thick smoke drifted toward the horizon like dispersing storm clouds, revealing the scorched, messy earth at the foot of the volcano. Rocks were fractured, magma flowed from the crevices, and the air still carried the pungent smell of sulfur and the scorching heat left by the energy blast. Just as the Vikings' anxiety reached its peak, a familiar dark figure slowly flew out of the smoke and dust. Myra's wings beat with extraordinary effort, each flap accompanied by a noticeable tremor. Her black scales were stained with wet lava residue and scorched bloodstains. Her normally sharp golden dragon eyes were now filled with exhaustion, yet they were fixed intently on the person in her embrace. She flew very low, her wings almost brushing the gravel on the ground, and her flight posture was shaky. Clearly, the previous ultimate attack and the act of saving Lin had completely drained all her strength. Mira. Hiccup's voice instantly cracked. Toothless also let out an urgent dragon roar, wanting to rush forward, but Hiccup held him back firmly. He was afraid of startling the weak Mira, and even more afraid of injuring Lin in her arms. Mira slowly landed on the black beach. As she folded her wings, she created a faint gust of air. She carefully lowered her head and gently placed Lin from her embrace onto the soft sand. Lin's eyes were tightly shut, his face pale as paper, his lips cracked. His clothes were tattered, and his exposed skin was covered in burns and scratches. His breathing was so faint it was almost imperceptible. As soon as she set Lin down, Mira anxiously paced around him, emitting low, rapid whimpers from her throat. Her golden dragon eyes were full of panic. She extended her nose and gently nudged Lin's cheek. Only when she sensed that life still pulsed within Lin did her tense body relax slightly. Had she been a moment later, had Lin lost his breath, this black dragon, having just exhausted its power, would likely have immediately gone into an uncontrollable frenzy, turning the entire area into scorched earth. Lin. Quick, check on him. The Vikings could no longer hold back and surged forward like a tide, treading extremely lightly, afraid of disturbing Mira. Stoic knelt down and tremblingly reached for Lin's carotid artery. When he felt the faint pulse, his eyes instantly reddened. He's breathing. He's alive. Fishlegs immediately pulled out the simple first aid kit he carried and stepped forward to treat Lin's wounds. Mira continued to pace anxiously nearby, her tail lightly sweeping the ground, kicking up fine sand. Just as everyone gathered, cautiously checking Lin's injuries, a sound of rushing air suddenly came from overhead. Whoosh! Everyone instinctively looked up and saw a fist-sized, deep red jade stone falling from high altitude. Its surface glowed with a warm yet strange luster, as if solidified lava had been meticulously polished. It traced an arc in the air, landing precisely in front of Lin, rolling a few times on the sand before finally stopping next to his hand. What is this? Snotlout instinctively reached out to touch it, but Mira suddenly darted her head forward, her sharp talons pressing down on the jade stone with lightning speed. A flicker of vigilance and a strange emotion crossed her golden dragon eyes, as if this stone held a special significance for her. She gently nudged the jade stone toward herself with her claw, guarding it fiercely and preventing anyone from approaching. Stoic frowned slightly, glancing between the jade stone and Mira. He decided instantly, forget about that thing. The most important thing now is saving Lin. Someone, get the stretcher, return to Burke Island immediately, and fetch the best shaman. Two strong Vikings immediately stepped forward as ordered, carefully lifting Lin onto the simple stretcher that had been prepared, their movements as gentle as if they were handling fragile treasure. Mira followed closely beside the stretcher. Every step she took seemed exceptionally weak, yet she constantly shielded the stretcher with her body, her golden dragon eyes never leaving Lin. Hiccup rode toothless, escorting them nearby. Astrid, Fishlegs, and the others followed closely, with Stoic covering the rear. The entire team quickly moved toward the direction of the sole remaining warship. The Vikings' faces no longer showed the ecstasy of victory, only deep concern for Lin's safety. Their steps were hurried but orderly. As the fleet slowly sailed away from the Black Beach, and as Myra's figure gradually receded with the warship, disappearing beyond the horizon, a dull tremor suddenly emanated from the previously calm volcano island. Buzz. The ground began to shake slightly. Pebbles on the Black Beach bounced, and dark red magma slowly oozed from the cracks at the foot of the volcano. The tremors grew stronger and stronger. Spiderweb-like fissures began appearing on the ground. The entire volcano island seemed to have been awakened by some force. Rocks along the edges continuously crumbled and fell into the sea, splashing up massive waves. Even stranger, the area of the island was slowly expanding. New land was rising from the sea along the previously steep coastline, bringing with it moist vapor and scorching heat. A spatial rift slowly formed. Lin's consciousness felt like it was submerged in a boundless, icy deep sea, surrounded by impenetrable darkness and cold. He floated, he sank, and even his breaths carried a bone-chilling frost, as if he would be forever trapped in this dead silence. After an unknown amount of time, a faint but resolute warm power suddenly emanated from a distant place, like a ray of warm sunlight piercing through the deep sea, slowly spreading through his consciousness. The warmth grew stronger, dispelling the cold around him and awakening his muddled thoughts. Blurry sounds began to echo in his ears, and then, a clear and tender thought, without warning, broke into his mind. Mommy, wake up. Mommy. Mommy. Lin was startled, his consciousness instantly clearing up significantly. He could clearly perceive the urgency and dependence in this thought, and what shocked him even more was that this was the first time he had communicated with Mira so genuinely through consciousness previously. It had been at most a tacit understanding, never such a direct transmission of thought. He struggled to lift his heavy eyelids, and the first thing that came into view was Mira's black scales, close at hand. Sunlight filtered through the gaps in the wooden house, scattering onto the scales, giving them a faint luster, yet unable to conceal the unhealed scorch marks and fatigue. Mira was gently resting her head by his bed, her golden dragon eyes fixed on him, filled with an unyielding worry. Seeing him open his eyes, her dragon eyes suddenly lit up, and a soft, "Awoo," immediately escaped her throat. Her thought came through clearly again. Mommy. You're finally awake. Awoo. Lin opened his mouth, his throat terribly dry, his voice hoarse from waking and filled with undeniable surprise. Mira. You can communicate with me directly through consciousness now. Mira nodded vigorously, her golden dragon eyes full of joy, and gently rubbed Lin's hand. Her awoo awoo sounds were full of happiness, and her thoughts became equally joyful. Yes. The power of the dragon jade has made our connection stronger. Mommy, does anything hurt? Awoo. It doesn't hurt much, but Mira, how did you know that was the dragon jade, and also? Lin looked at Mira's sincere eyes, speaking with some helplessness. Mira, don't call me mommy. As soon as the words fell, Mira's ears instantly drooped. The joy in her golden dragon eyes quickly faded, replaced by immense grievance. Her massive body also curled up slightly, her tail drooped weakly to the ground, and tiny, pitiful, woo-woo, sounds escaped her throat. Her thoughts were filled with unease. I just knew after seeing it. Mommy, do you not want me anymore? Awoo. Seeing this, Lin quickly shook his head, reaching out to gently stroke Mira's head, his voice exceptionally gentle. No, Mira, I don't not want you. Lin slowed his speech, patiently explaining, it's just that, Mommy, isn't quite the right title. How about we use a different one, alright? Mira's emotions calmed down slightly, her golden dragon eyes showing a hint of confusion mixed with full expectation. She cautiously rubbed Lin's palm, letting out a soft, awoo, sound from her throat, her thoughts filled with earnestness. Then, Master. Can I call you Master? Awoo. Lin looked at the complete trust and dependence in Mira's eyes, his heart warming. He nodded gently and softly said, just call me Master. Mira's eyes immediately lit up, and the light in her golden dragon eyes rekindled. A clear and joyful, awoo, came from her throat, and her thoughts were transmitted clearly and firmly. Master. Awoo. Lin looked at Mira's renewed cheerful appearance, a warm current surging through him, his eyes slightly moist. He slowly raised his hand and gently stroked Mira's head. The warm sensation of scales came from his fingertips, and he also felt Mira's slightly trembling body. The fatigue and pain in his body were still present, but much lighter than before he fainted. Clearly, this warm power had been silently nourishing him. I'm fine, Mira, Lin responded mentally, his voice hoarse from just waking. I made you worry. Hearing Lin's response, Mira's tense body instantly relaxed, and the worry in her golden dragon eyes was replaced by ecstasy. She carefully rubbed Lin's hand with her snout, letting out a string of joyful, awoo sounds. Her tail gently swept across the ground, creating a rustling sound, but she deliberately lightened her force, afraid of disturbing him after he had just woken up. That's great, as long as Master is okay, awoo. Mira's thoughts came again, filled with undisguised joy. I've been guarding you, I've always been here, awoo. Lin looked at the sincerity in Mira's eyes, and the warmth in his heart grew even stronger. He knew that he was able to wake up from that cold slumber because Mira had been protecting him with her power. Just as he was about to say something more, the wooden house door was gently pushed open. Stoic walked in with Hiccup, Astrid, Fishlegs, and others. Everyone's face was filled with urgency and anticipation. Lin, you're awake. Stoic was the first to speak, his rough face filled with undisguised relief, his steps exceptionally light. This is wonderful, you've been unconscious for 2 days, we were also worried. Hiccup also hurried to the bedside, his eyes sparkling. Lin, how do you feel? Is anything uncomfortable? Lin nodded gently, his voice still somewhat weak. I'm much better, thank you. Stoic sat down by the bed, sighed, and slowly explained, do you remember? We brought you back from the volcanic island. On the way, we first applied some emergency ointment to alleviate your injuries, originally thinking of waiting for the shaman to give you more detailed treatment. But before the shaman arrived, Mira suddenly moved. He paused, remembering the scene at the time, his eyes full of surprise. It swallowed the dark red gem it had been protecting in one gulp. We didn't even react, and it threw its head back and let out a low growl, radiating a particularly strong deterrent force that forced us all out. Indeed. Hiccup interjected, his tone full of shock. After that, we wanted to come in and check on you, but as soon as we got close to the wooden house door, we were severely pressed to the ground by an invisible pressure, unable to even stand up. Toothless and the other dragons also didn't dare to approach, retreating anxiously as soon as they got near the wooden house, unable to take a single step forward. Stoic nodded, continuing, for these 2 days, Mira stayed by your side without leaving an inch, not eating or drinking. No matter how we tried to persuade it, it wouldn't leave the wooden house for half a step, with only you in its eyes. Just now, Hiccup said Toothless sensed that strange pressure here had disappeared, so he rushed over to check, and unexpectedly, you really woke up. That's truly wonderful. Following Stoic's words, Lin remembered the red jade stone that fell from high in the sky, and also Myra's resolute act of swallowing the jade stone. He looked at Mira, who was standing tall beside him, her golden dragon eyes disdainfully sweeping over the crowd, as if silently declaring her status. But when she looked at Lin, her gaze immediately softened. It's the power of that red death dragon jade, and you've been absorbing ley line energy and transmitting it to me, right? Lin asked Mira mentally. Mira gently rubbed his arm, her thoughts softly conveying, the jade stone has warm power, and it feels like it can help Master recover. I also absorbed ley line energy, so I can keep nourishing Master, to help Master recover quickly, AWOO. Her, AWOO, sounds reached his ears, carrying a resolute sense of guardianship. As long as Master is well, nothing else matters, AWOO. Lin looked at Myra's tired yet still resolute appearance, and the warmth in his heart grew even stronger. He knew that this cross-species bond had long become the most solid reliance in each other's lives. Lin was still immersed in the warmth of his connection with Mira when Hiccup, unable to contain his excitement, stepped forward, his eyes bright like dewdrops on a spring morning. Lin, you wouldn't believe it, but while you were asleep these past 2 days, Burke Island has completely changed. Really? Lin's heart stirred, and a surge of curiosity overcame his still weak body. He braced himself on the edge of the bed and slowly sat up. What did it turn into? Mira immediately understood, gently nudging his back with her head, sending a thought. Master, I'll help you, roar. Her movements were exceptionally gentle, afraid of pulling on Lin's wounds. Stoic quickly stepped forward to lend a hand, and Astrid handed over a clean animal hide jerkin. Put on some clothes first. The wind outside is warm, it's the perfect time to show you. Lin nodded, slowly getting out of bed with everyone's gentle support, and stretched his limbs, though still sore, his internal strength had mostly recovered. The energy inside his body seemed to flow gently through his meridians, nourishing every damaged area. He put on the jerkin and fastened a leather belt commonly used by Vikings around his waist. His long black hair was casually tied back, falling onto his shoulders and back. The moment he pushed the door open, a spring breeze carrying the fragrance of grass and wood blew toward him, stirring the loose hair on his forehead. Lin instinctively narrowed his eyes. His golden pupils, identical to Myra's, instantly caught the lively scene in the sky, a dozen or so dragons circling and flying below the clouds. There were the familiar deadly natters and monstrous nightmares, along with several round gronkles, all common species from the dragon's nest. They were no longer the feared beasts they once were, but were stretching their wings and letting out joyful rumbles, mingling with the sound of the distant waves. Ha 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 ha. Stop chasing me. A burst of clear childish laughter drifted over. Lin followed the sound and saw a palm-sized terrible terror running on short legs, chasing a Viking child on the grass at the edge of the square. The terrible terror occasionally opened its mouth, letting out a tender roar, and spitting out a negligible little flame, causing the child to scream and quicken his pace, yet his face was full of smiles, showing no fear whatsoever. Turning his gaze to the wooden house area ahead, a deadly natter was standing under its owner's eaves, carefully using its large wings to help hang clothes on a line to dry. Its movements were clumsy but earnest, the force of its wing flaps was just enough to make the clothes sway gently without tearing the rope. Not far away, Gobber's blacksmith shop chimney was emitting wisps of smoke. A fully grown Gronkel was sprawled out at the shop entrance, snoring deeply. Its belly rose and fell with its breath, a trace of glistening drool hung from the corner of its mouth, and it occasionally let out a contented huff, undisturbed even by the clanging sounds coming from the forge. When he looked toward the sea, the scene was even more heartwarming. 2 monstrous nightmares skimmed low over the water, their wings flapping, creating gusts of air, and using their claws to help the villagers on the shore pull fishing nets. The fishing net was pulled taut and full, and shimmering fish leapt inside, splashing water that glistened with rainbow colors in the sunlight. The villagers cheered, their shouts complementing the low rumbles of the monstrous nightmares. Lin stood at the doorway, his eyes filled with shock and relief, a smile unconsciously spreading across his lips. Everyone and the dragons are actually living in such harmony. What do you think? Hiccup walked up beside him, his tone filled with pride. Ever since you and Mira defeated the Red Death, everyone fully understood that dragons are not enemies. Now, every household has its own dragon companion, some help with work, others play with the children. It's much livelier than before. Mira leaned close to Lin, her golden dragon eyes reflecting her kin flying in the sky, sending a thought. They are all friendly, master. Burke Island is safe now, roar. She let out a soft roar from her throat, and her tail gently swept the ground, raising a slight breeze. Stoic walked up behind Lin, his hands clasped behind his back, and looked at the vibrant scene before them, a relieved smile on his face. This is all the change you and Mira brought. Lin, continue to recuperate well here at home. Stoic turned around, his gaze becoming particularly solemn. I have already discussed it with the Vikings of the tribe. Once your injuries heal, you will be formally appointed as the new chieftain of Burke Island. What? Lin spun around abruptly, momentarily speechless, his golden pupils filled with surprise. I don't think I can do it. He had never considered becoming the chieftain. Before, he only wanted to protect the people around him and Mira. You can. Stoic patted his shoulder, his strength steady and firm. You were able to form such a deep bond with a dragon, you stood up for the tribe to defeat the Red Death, and you possess a heart dedicated to protecting our home. You are more suited for this position than anyone. Hiccup also quickly nodded. That's right, Lin. We all support you. With you as chieftain, Burke Island is sure to get better and better. Astrid and Fishlegs also chimed in, their eyes full of trust. Mira nudged Lin's arm with her head, her thought firm. Master, you can do it. I will always be with you, roar. Lin looked at his familiar companions before him, gazed at the distant scene of humans and dragons coexisting harmoniously, and then lowered his head to look at Mira beside him, whose eyes were sincere. The hesitation in his heart gradually vanished. He took a deep breath, the warm spring wind filling his chest, bringing with it a sense of resolute strength. All right, I accept. Stoic nodded in satisfaction and instructed, don't overthink it. Getting proper rest and recovering your spirit is what's most important right now. Hiccup and the others echoed his words, said a few more words of concern, and then turned to leave, gently closing the door behind them. Quietness instantly returned to the room, with only the occasional dragon roar and children's laughter drifting in from outside the window, softly lingering in his ears. Lin turned and walked to the bed, sat down cross-legged, closed his eyes, and subconsciously began to sense the power within his body. At first, it was just a faint warm current flowing slowly along his meridians, but the more he sensed it, the more incredible it felt. The energy previously depleted from fighting the Red Death was now so full it seemed ready to overflow. The red and blue energies intertwined, more refined and pure than ever before. He could clearly feel that his body's recovery ability had increased severalfold. The burns and muscle bone damage that had been faintly aching were now healing at a visible speed, and a faint tingling sensation came from beneath his skin, that was new flesh growing. He tried clenching his fist, and a sense of power far exceeding his past limits surged from his limbs and joints. His muscle explosive power, physical flexibility, and even the sharpness of his five senses had all more than doubled. When his golden pupils opened, even the dust floating in the air was clearly visible. He could see the scale patterns on the terrible terror 100 meters outside the window with perfect clarity. This must be the effect brought by the Red Death's dragon jade. Lin understood internally. The dragon jade's energy not only tightened his connection with Mira but also completely transformed his body, allowing his strength to achieve a qualitative leap. A warm head gently nudged his arm. Mira leaned closer, her golden dragon eyes full of curiosity, sending a thought. Master, are you sensing your power? Roar. Lin came back to his senses, reached out and hugged Mira's thick neck, pressing his cheek against her warm scales, his voice filled with gratitude. Mira, thank you. If you hadn't thought of swallowing the dragon jade and absorbing the ley line energy to nourish me, I wouldn't have recovered this quickly. Mira's body stiffened slightly, seemingly shy from the sudden intimacy. Her golden dragon eyes narrowed slightly, and she let out a faint, ooh, sound from her throat, her thought message carrying a hint of awkwardness. Master, no need to thank me, as long as I could help you, roar. Her tail curled slightly, as if to hide her shyness. Lin couldn't help but smile at her expression, his fingertips gently stroking the faint red marks remaining on her scales. Mira, let's guide the energy resonance together. This way, we can both solidify this strength and completely heal our injuries. Okay. I'll listen to Master. Roar. Mira nodded immediately, her golden dragon eyes full of obedience. She slowly lay down on the ground in front of Lin, rested her head on her paws, closed her eyes, and began to actively guide the energy within her body. Lin also closed his eyes again, sinking his consciousness into his body. The red and blue energies slowly flowed out according to his will, surging toward Mira. The energy within Mira's body immediately responded, intertwining with Lin's red and blue energies. A faint halo gradually appeared in the room. The red and blue lights intertwined, forming a soft energy cocoon that enveloped the dragon and the human. At the same time, Lin could clearly feel a gentle ley line energy surging from beneath the ground, flowing into Mira through her limbs, and then being transferred to Lin via the energy resonance. The three types of energy circulated and flowed, continuously repairing their damaged bodies and refining their respective strengths. Lin's golden pupils faintly glowed beneath his eyelids. His depleted body was filled with energy, the fatigue from the previous battle was completely smoothed away, and his bones and muscles were nourished by the energy, becoming tougher. Mira's breathing also became longer and deeper. The scorch marks on her scales gradually faded, her black wings shone with a faint luster, and her previously exhausted body was revitalized. The human and the dragon cultivated quietly, energy flowing incessantly between them, their hearts closely connected through consciousness. There were no superfluous words, only silent understanding and deep bonds. The spring breeze outside the window remained gentle. The vibrant life of Burke Island intertwined with the energy resonance in the room, forming a warm and resolute picture. A new leader was rising, and his bond with his dragon would become Burke Island's most solid protection. 3 days later, early in the morning, the sun shone brightly over Burke Island. Golden light flooded the entire square, warming the flagstone path. A high platform, built from thick logs, stood in the center of the square, surrounded by banners painted with Viking totems and dragon patterns, flapping loudly in the spring breeze. The square was already packed with people, almost all the Vikings had arrived. Elders sat on benches covered with animal hides, children excitedly looked around from the backs of their dragon companions, and adults conversed in small groups, their faces full of anticipation. Dozens of dragons circled and flew in the sky, occasionally letting out cheerful low growls, mingling with the human voices on the ground. It was lively but orderly. This was the grandest day Burke Island had seen in centuries, and also the most special, because today's new chieftain was the hero who ended the feud between the Vikings and the dragon race. Lin stood on one side of the high platform, wearing a brand new black animal hide robe, the collar and cuffs embroidered with dark red dragon patterns, the color of red jade stone. His long black hair was tied into a high ponytail, revealing a clear forehead. His golden pupils shone astonishingly bright in the sun. After 3 days of energy resonance, his injuries were completely healed, and he exuded a calm and resolute aura, making him seem like a completely different person from the slightly inexperienced warrior he was before. Stoic stood in the center of the high platform, wearing the chieftain's animal hide greatcoat passed down through generations. The wolf-tooth necklace on his chest gleamed coldly in the sunlight. He raised his hand, signaling everyone to quiet down. The noisy square instantly fell silent. Even the dragons in the sky lowered their altitude, circling docilely, their gazes unanimously fixed on the high platform. People of Burke Island, and our dragon friends. Stoic's voice was as loud as a bell, carried by the wind to every corner of the square. 500 years. A full 500 years. We Vikings and the dragon race have spent our lives in fear, slaughter, and hatred. So many clansmen have lost loved ones, this sea remembers our blood and tears. His gaze swept over the faces below the platform, elders who had experienced war, and children who had never seen the dragon scourge. His tone gradually became passionate, until Lin appeared. He possesses the special ability of dragon resonance. He fought alongside Mira, ended the reign of the Red Death, and showed us through his actions, that humans and dragons are not born enemies. A slight stir arose in the crowd. Many elders recalled past suffering, their eyes slightly red, while children looked curiously at their dragon companions, their faces full of innocence and joy. It was Lin who allowed our children to play with young dragons. It was Lin who allowed dragon eggs to be born in our pastures. It was Lin who enabled Burke Island to bid farewell to 5 centuries of grievances and usher in true peace. Stoic's voice grew louder. He turned and looked at Lin beside him, his eyes filled with relief and expectation. Such a hero, such a leader, is worthy of the chieftain position of Burke Island. Before his voice faded, Stoic suddenly reached out, firmly grasped Lin's wrist, and raised his arm high. I announce, starting today, Lin is officially the new chieftain of Burke Island. Chieftain Lin. Chieftain Lin. The cheers instantly erupted like a tsunami. The Vikings raised their drinking horns and axes, vigorously waving their arms. Children screamed and cheered on dragon back, and even the flagstones on the ground seemed to shake. The dragon flocks in the sky also let out long cries, mingling with the cheers of the crowd, echoing over Burke Island and lingering for a long time. Just then, a black figure slowly walked out from behind the crowd. It was Mira. It walked with steady steps, its golden dragon pupils scanning the square. Every step carried the majesty of an alpha dragon. When it reached the foot of the high platform, Mira suddenly stopped, its massive body rising upright. Immediately afterward, its black wings, a full 24 meters wide, suddenly spread out like 2 black feathers covering the sky, their edges glowing faintly red. The energy within its body flowed beneath its scales, dazzling and conspicuous. Awoo! A dragon roar that shook heaven and earth burst from Mira's throat. The golden sound waves spread out, carrying undeniable coercion. All the dragons in the square, regardless of size, uniformly lowered their heads and emitted respectful low growls from their throats. Even the dragons circling in the sky landed and lay prone on the ground, paying homage to their leader. Lin felt the steady strength of Stoic's grip on his hand, and heard the earth-shattering cheers and dragon roars in his ears. His golden pupils were filled with determination. He raised his other hand, gently signaling the crowd to quiet down. The cheers gradually subsided, and all eyes focused on him. Lin felt the steady strength of Stoic's grip on his hand, and heard the earth-shattering cheers and dragon roars in his ears. His golden pupils were filled with determination. He raised his other hand, gently signaling the crowd to quiet down. The cheers gradually subsided, and all eyes focused on him. Clansmen, dragon friends, Lin's voice was not the loudest, but it carried a power that pierced the heart. Thank you for your trust. The end of 5 centuries of grievances is not my achievement alone. It was forged by every clansman willing to let go of hatred and accept dragons, and by every dragon longing for peace and coexisting with humans, together creating Burke Island as it is today. He paused, his gaze sweeping over the elderly, the weak, women, and children below the platform, and the children playing with dragons. His tone became increasingly earnest. From now on, I swear as chieftain to protect this homeland, to protect every clansman, and to protect this hard-won peace between humans and dragons. We will guard together, fish together, and explore together, making Burke Island a true paradise. Warm applause erupted again below the platform. Stoic looked at Lin, his eyes full of relief. Lin raised his hand to quiet them down, and continued, Next, I have 2 important appointments. He turned to Stoic beside him and bowed slightly with respect. Chieftain Stoic, no, starting today, you are the great elder of Burke Island. You possess rich experience and prestige, and are the tribe's strongest support. Should I leave the tribe in the future, all tribal affairs, big and small, will be entirely managed by the great elder. A trace of surprise flashed in Stoic's eyes, followed by a relieved smile. He nodded heavily. I will certainly live up to the chieftain's trust and protect Burke Island well. The Vikings below the platform cheered their approval. Their trust in Stoic was deeply rooted, and this appointment made everyone feel reassured. Lin then turned his gaze toward Hiccup in the crowd, raising his hand to signal him to approach. Hiccup, your understanding of dragons and your passion for exploration are unmatched. I appoint you as the commander of the Dragon Riders. Select clansmen from the village who perform excellently and have deep bonds with dragons to form Burke Island's first Dragon Riders unit. Hiccup's eyes widened suddenly, his face filled with surprise and excitement. He quickly ran up to the platform and nodded vigorously. I will definitely do it. The Dragon Riders will become Burke Island's strongest defense line. Dragon Riders. Dragon Riders. The young Vikings below instantly burst into excitement, raising their hands and shouting loudly, their eyes full of longing. fighting alongside dragons and protecting their home was the dream of every young Viking. Lin watched Hiccup's excitement and continued, "The dragon riders are not just a fighting force, but also a symbol of coexistence between humans and dragons. You must trust your dragon partners and cooperate seamlessly to protect the safety of Burke Island and the peace of the surrounding sea areas." "Understood, chieftain." Hiccup straightened his chest, his eyes full of determination. Toothless let out a cheerful low growl below the platform, his black pupils full of excitement, clearly eager to start training with Hiccup. "Long live Chieftain Lin. Long live the Great Elder. Long live the Dragon Riders." The cheers surged again like a tide, even more enthusiastic than before. The Vikings raised their drinking horns, draining the ale inside, while children on dragon back cheered joyfully as the dragons ran around. The dragon flocks in the sky let out long cries once more. The airflow from their flapping wings stirred up petals that scattered everywhere, landing on people's heads and shoulders, like a blessing from nature. The spring breeze brushed against their faces, carrying the festive air of the square. It passed over the wooden house area, swept past the fishing nets by the sea, and finally blew toward the herbivorous dragon prairie in the distance. On the prairie, 3 adult herbivorous dragons lay docilely on the new green grass, protecting 2 nests of dragon eggs beneath them. The eggshells had green patterns and shone with a warm, pearlescent luster. The spring breeze gently brushed the dragon eggs, blowing away fine dust from the shells, revealing the faint flow of life energy beneath. Mira slowly walked to the edge of the high platform, gently nudging Lin's palm with its head. The mental message came through. "Master, awoo." Lin leaned down and stroked Mira's scales, feeling the warmth in his palm. He looked at the festive scene before him, then gazed toward the dragon eggs quietly incubating on the distant prairie, his golden eyes filled with anticipation. Thanks for watching.